Hey there guys, I'm Hammurabae, and today I will be continuing the tutorial series for Millennium Dawn on what makes up the economic features. This mod has overall a very simple economic system and should be very intuitive once you understand the basics. Economics is the foundation of modern nation building, as military might and even prestige bow to the power of currency and growth. I hope that this video will make this mod more playable and fun for you. Let's get started. The first thing to cover is your income, which allows you to spend money on the various expenditures and decisions that will help you grow and prosper. The new update features a slightly changed model, so for returning players you may see some major differences. The first thing to cover is how your income functions. Population income is directly correlated to the number of people in your country and varies based on the population tax rate. This income will be really high for nations like China or India, but will be almost non-existent for small countries like Monaco or Malta. It is important to note that raising taxes by 1% also decreases stability by 1%. Corporate income is based off of civs, mills, naval dockyards, and offices. The most valuable of which, by far, is offices. However, civs do provide the capacity to build more of anything, so they are still hugely important. This is a major change from the old version of Millennium Dawn, where civs dictated GDP almost entirely. It is also important to note that corporate tax increases raises tax costs, which is the same as consumer goods in single player. Therefore, if you have a high tax rate, your civs won't be able to build anything. International investments allows one to earn money back on money invested in other countries, and will be talked about more in depth later. It is always a flat 6% return on investment. Next is resource exports, which in addition to providing civs, which can be used for construction like in vanilla, trading goods also provides direct economic income. This is dependent on the resource itself, and some give more than others. Oil is overwhelmingly the most valuable and is a very useful thing to acquire and export. Your laws are the primary inputs that cost your nation money. They are all different, but it is important to remember that some texts have an effect towards lowering their cost. Bureaucracy spending is a metric for governmental organs' cost. It is based purely off of population and relatively low even at max. This is a cheap way to get extra political power and an increase to military factory construction speed. Defense is a much more complicated expense metric that varies dramatically based on spending levels. The costs for it are made up of military and dockyard expenses. Both of these buildings cost money to maintain, and this is reflected here. In addition, there are personnel costs, which include all units such as ships, planes, and divisions. Higher military expenditure laws will increase the cost quite dramatically, so be careful increasing it. In addition, GDP per capita has a direct effect. The wealthier your country, the higher the cost to maintain your forces. Internal security provides some very useful bonuses, but reduces your political power gain. The cost is tied directly to population as well, and the DNA fingerprinting tech reduces the total cost by 5%. Education budget is an incredibly useful expenditure, but it does also decrease political power gain. The cost is correlated to population, though internet research will reduce the cost of this expenditure. Healthcare costs is a very useful expenditure as well, as it massively increases population growth, which is very useful. Much like the real world, population is power as long as you can give your citizens good jobs. It also reduces tax costs by up to 4%, which again is the equivalent to consumer goods in vanilla. It is important to note that although this cost is simply tied to population, it is much higher than the other ones besides welfare, so be careful. Lastly, welfare spending, which is another very powerful but expensive expenditure. It also provides political power and stability gain. However, again, much like healthcare, it is correlated to population and can be incredibly costly. Debt is something I will be covering separately later in this video, but this is where you can see the interest costs on your principal amount. Additional expenses can be a number of things, but the major ones to note are EU membership fees, which although never extreme are significant, and industrial decision costs. Debt is a complicated but definitive part of modern economics. For some nations, it is the key to economic development that can transform their nation into a modern power. But for others, it is the beginning of their downfall. Many nations of Millennium Dawn start with lots of debt, but don't be too afraid if you see a massive number. It will simply require spending cuts and austerity to reduce. As with any type of debt, the real heart of danger is interest. Loans are not free and require an incentive for banks and others to give them out. Therefore, you will have to pay a percent of the principal amount monthly, which can be found in the Expenses tab. Interest rates go up by 0.1% for every 100 billion borrowed and down by 0.1% for every 100 billion repaid. It is important to keep interest rates low, or else your payments on it will become higher and higher, potentially crippling your economy and getting you into a hole that's very hard to get back out of. If your interest rate goes high enough, you may have to declare bankruptcy, which will be disastrous. Don't be afraid to use debt to invest into your economy or even fight wars, just as long as you try to keep it low and interest rates under control, or you could destroy your country. The same menu where you can keep track of your debt interest also gives you a host of other useful tools to grow your economy and military-industrial complex. The first three options are leasing different types of buildings. This costs a flat 0.3 billion and allows you to get access to some extra production or industrial capacity. However, they do not provide any income value. Industrial projects, in addition, increase the opinion of the industrial conglomerate faction, which provides heightened bonuses. Leasing military factories decreases the opinion of the military-industrial complex, so be careful using it. Next, we have the project options, which provide bonuses to civilian industry, infrastructure, military industry, and dockyards. These are massive bonuses and incredibly useful. However, it is important to note that they cost 0.05% of the GDP, which is significant, so use them carefully. So now that you know the basic structure behind the economics of this mod, let's look at how one grows their economy, which is of course power in the modern era. This really all comes down to construction, which is how economic expansion works in real life to a large degree. Civilian industry is the most important in the beginning, because in addition to the income that you get out of the corporate tax rate, it provides the capacity to build all other buildings, which is key early on. Strong growth early means strong results later. Second is office sectors, which although providing nothing useful in and of themselves, are very valuable tax-wise. They provide much more value in terms of direct income than any other building depending on the corporate tax rate. Military factories and dockyards are also useful but provide much less income, though they do have military uses which are very important based on the route you are going. Obviously, this means that construction speeds are very important, so make sure to go for every bonus that you can get. Trade is also a hugely important, as in addition to providing civs, it also gives direct income, so conquering nations with lots of resources or building infrastructure to get more out of what you already have is useful, assuming it's something you can actually sell. I mentioned earlier how useful trade is for income and getting access to more civs, but let's expand on it a little further here. Modern economics is intrinsically tied to globalization, which means trade sits at the center of nations' economic policies and decision making. In this menu, you will see the different trade laws. Going down the options, you will put more and more of your total resources onto the market like vanilla. What is important to note is that having more globalized trade laws actually reduces tax costs, while having a closed economy increases costs. In addition, both consumption and semi-consumption laws increase trade opinion with other nations, meaning they are more likely to trade with you for resources over other nations. Just because you put resources onto the market doesn't mean that they will be sold. It will be dependent on what the other nations in your game need. One important tool for selling more of your goods is to use your spies to increase trade opinion in bigger countries, which will make them buy more goods from you. Some nation focus trees also increase trade relations, so check out your national focus tree for those options. Lastly, you can make trade agreements with countries that like you, increasing trade opinion by a whopping 50, in addition to increasing opinion and providing a bit of influence. Foreign investment is a complex tool used and abused by modern nations. Many countries view outsider money with caution and for good reason. It gives other countries unparalleled influence and profits over them. This menu allows you to spend your own money on other countries by constructing buildings for them. This investment gives an unmoving 6% return on investment for you, in addition to some influence. Other nations will also do this to you, so you will sometimes see an event pop up with an investment proposal from another country. It's almost always worth taking, but keep in mind you will still have to pay for a small portion of it. Economic cycles represent the state of your nation's economy, which has a huge impact on everyday life. Older folks will probably understand these fairly well, with 2008 being a good example of a recession. How this specifically affects your economy is fairly simple. Construction speed is massively effective and varies based on level, with the lower cycles jumping up and down a lot quicker than the higher ones. Tax revenue, which accounts for all tax income made, is also effective for better or worse. So if you want to make more money fast, make sure to get yourself into a better cycle. Lastly, there is corruption, which I have covered at length in the previous video. What is important to understand for economics is that corruption levels massively decrease tax revenue, as it is getting siphoned off by corrupt officials and politicians. If you have a lot of corruption, it will probably be your first uses of political power to get it down so you can run a proper economy. Another thing to note about buildings in Millennium Dawn with the new update is that they actually take fuel to maintain. So make sure to keep a close eye on your fuel reserves to make sure that they don't run out of power. This concludes the economic tutorial for Millennium Dawn. Once you get a hang of this part of the mod and game, everything else becomes easier. For me, the economic depth of this mod is one of the main reasons it is so special and provides such a unique Hearts of Iron experience. Grow your economy and watch as your foes quickly come to fear your might. In the next tutorial video, we will look at the military part of this mod. See you soon, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the video.